At Arizona State University, we've made online education better, smarter, and more personalized so you can go further in your aspiring field.
I decided to pursue medicine once I realized that ASU did have the online program for biological sciences. You're still required to learn the same curriculum. You're still being tested on the same content that anyone would be tested on in person. The comprehensiveness of the program prepared me so well for medical school.
Explore over 300 programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
This is Wheelbearings. I'm Dan Roth from Forbes, although they might not believe that at this point with my 2019 productivity.
And I'm Sam Abul-Samad from Navigant Research.
And I'm Rebecca Lindland from RebeccaDrives.com.
So welcome back from the New York show. I listened to the episode that you two recorded in a Navigator last week.
With a very angry product specialist signaling for us to get out of the car so he could close up shop.
Pointing? Or?
Oh yeah, he was doing all kinds of signals. You know, it's like tapping on his wrist and waving for us to get out. Cause it was closing in on close to 5 o'clock when the show floor is supposed to close up, and I think he wanted to get home.
Drinking to be done at that point.
But
exactly.
It wasn't like there was a line waiting to get into the car.
It wasn't. I don't think it was that. I think they just wanted us to get out, so they could close up.
Yeah, he was very aggressive.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? I mean, for all the dirty looks he may have given you for being in a Navigator, I listened to that show while I was driving a Navigator, and I could give them. Yeah, it was just a fun little coincidence, and I could shoot back plenty of my own dirty looks for the horrendously uncomfortable seats. I'm not sure how you guys managed to stay in there and stay comfortable and talk for that long.
How can you have 30-way power seats and not find a comfortable position?
I know.
I think because they're 30-way power seats, there's no perfect, there's no good setting, and so the biggest issue is the head restraints.
You're just deformed.
Yeah,
probably. Doesn't everybody have a hunchback? And the biggest issue is my sort of constant bitching about those head restraints. And Lincoln's not the only company that does it, but you can't get with the power seats, you can't get it out of the way enough. So, sort of forces you into this weird sitting position. And they have there's the thigh support as two different split things. There's no way to synchronize them, so they're never exactly the same. It's weird.
Yeah, well, most people aren't totally symmetrical anyway. That's why you have two separate ones.
So
I guess
I don't know if we've ever talked about the head restraint things, because are you talking about the headrests specifically?
Yeah. So a lot of cars, they're very aggressive. My Volvos were like this too. The last ones I had, and I don't like it messing with the back of my head, and I don't rest my head on it when I drive.
So my chiropractor has been going on and on about these head restraints. And I know we're kind of off topic, but I have to stick up for her on this. So she says that she will have clients come in and bitterly complain about neck pain.
Yep.
And inevitably they have gotten a new car, usually a European model. And if you touch the back of your head, just with the slightest bit of anything, your neck instantly engages. And her theory is that with these aggressively positioned headrests, that your neck is always engaged, like your muscles are always a little bit tense, and people's necks end up being really sore. And she is she will talk for half an hour to me if I let her about all these different.
Then she'll need to massage her jaw.
Exactly.
But no, I believe it, because that is my experience. And you wind up having to put the seat back at a weird angle to try to get some relief from it. And so in a lot of media cars, what I do is I take the head restraint out when you can take it out, and I turn it around and I put it back in. And it's perfect.
Yes.
But when they're fixed and you can't turn it around, it's impossible. And I also wonder for women, if you have a ponytail or a bun, or you wear your hair up.
Far worse.
It's not. I don't have a man bun, so it's not a problem for me. But
I'm disappointed about that.
Yeah. Those days are over. So all right, let's get to some cars that we're driving, because then we're going to talk about Rivian and Ford and Tesla and some auto geekery. But Sam, what did you drive to the show?
Just before the show,
to the airport to get to the show.
Yes, driving to the airport, I had and for the week prior to that, I had the 2019 Cadillac XT4 Premium Luxury all-wheel drive. Which is Caddy's new compact crossover. And, as it was when I drove it on the media drive last fall out in Seattle, it's still kind of a mixed bag. I really like the way it looks. I think it's got really great proportions, and, I think it's a good execution of Cadillac's design language. There's some of the things that they've done with it, like the side glass, especially at the rear, being fairly long. It goes back, pretty much all the way back, which makes it good when you're sitting in the back seat, because, in a lot of modern cars, when you sit in the back, you've got big, thick pillars that wrap around you, and you end up feeling kind of enclosed and, feeling like you're sitting in a bathtub or something. And the XT4, that's not a problem, because you've got glass coming all the way back behind your head. And so you've got really good visibility, and that's also good from the driver's seat, except for straight back, which almost all modern cars have a problem looking straight back. You've got, pretty good visibility all the way around, which is always good for driving. But I did have some niggles with mainly with the NVH properties, the noise, vibration, and harshness of this thing. Because I like the way it drives. The handling and the ride quality is generally quite good. The 2-liter turbo 4-cylinders got decent enough power, but compared to, we've talked a lot about Lincoln of late, and the whole quiet luxury theme, and the sanctuary interior, as they call it, and the XT4 is anything but a sanctuary interior. The engine is kind of noisy, and it's not the greatest sounding engine. Like I said, it makes plenty of power, but it doesn't sound that great doing it. One of the things that I complained about last fall when I drove it was on some roads, depending on the road texture, there was a lot of road noise that got transmitted into the cabin. And I experienced that again during my week with the XT4 here, that, on a lot of roads, there was a lot of noise being transmitted into the cabin, which, for a luxury vehicle that cost, over $50,000, it just didn't seem right.
It starts at $35,000. What do you want for $35,000? Do you want something quiet? I don't understand.
Well, I've driven a lot of other $35,000 vehicles that feel a lot quieter than this one.
I think that's unacceptable. I really do.
Yeah, I do too. At this price point, and even at the $35,000 base price, for what Cadillac's trying to be, as a taken seriously as a premium brand, and competing with, everybody from Lexus to Mercedes-Benz and Audi, they should do a little better with this. So that's probably my biggest complaint about this vehicle is the NVH. Aside from that, the interior, is nice. It doesn't feel quite. I don't think it feels quite as premium as what Lincoln's been doing lately.
Honestly, I'm looking at the gallery now. That looks more like it kind of, to me, doesn't even look like a $35,000 interior. And I'm sure that they've got the fancy trims on the website.
The premium Lux I had, was a little better than that, I think. But
I was really disappointed. I haven't driven it yet, but the day after we recorded the podcast, then on that Thursday, I spent all morning just going with a couple of friends from the industry, and we went car to car and looking. I'm looking at the picture that I took of the Cadillac, the XT4 interior, and first of all, I think the fake carbon fiber was dizzying.
Did it look as drab?
That's only on the sport model. Mine had wood trim.
Okay.
Did it look as drab in person as it does in pictures?
You know, one of the things that we talked, I think you brought it up last week, Rebecca, was, being tired of the piano black look. And
yeah.
So the XT4 does not have piano black. The black plastic surfaces are a matte finish, and I don't mind that, but it certainly I don't think it looks as premium, and I'm not sure what the right finish is. What the optimum look is to give it a premium feel, but without but something that's not piano black.
Right.
So it's not this.
This is what I found is that when I was comparing and contrasting like the XT4 with the Mercedes, for instance, the Mercedes GLC, which arguably is in the same segment, there were finishes to the Mercedes. There would be like a tip, like a button would have a tip of chrome at the end. The locks had a tip of chrome at the end. There was just the Mercedes was just finished.
Yeah. No, that's a valid point.
Very, very light touches of trim that give it that little that feeling that they really thought about it.
Exactly.
Well, and I think too, it's not just the finish or the pop of chrome. It's the feel of the materials. Are the knobs knurled? Do you feel a flash line? All of those little things, and they're not cheap to do.
Right.
So I get it.
And in that respect, I think the Cadillac was fine. The parts were nicely finished. You didn't feel flash lines. The knobs were knurled, including the big center controller, the rotary controller on the console, which is the other thing that I have a complaint about with this car. This is the first Cadillac to use a rotary controller, center rotary controller. Similar that at least looks similar to an iDrive or MMI or Mercedes command controller, but the thing this one is more limited than those because you can rotate it and you can push it down to select, but it has no like joystick jog dial function, so you can't toggle around the screen around the selection points on the screen with it other than through rotation. And so that limits some of the things you can do with it. The screen is also a touch screen, so you can touch the targets, but I'd prefer, if you're going to have a rotary controller like that, to make it fully functional. And in fact, I talked to the Cadillac folks at the CT5 preview, and they said that the XT6 and the CT5 actually both the rotary controllers they put in those do have that jog function. So it works like an iDrive does. And the XT4 will be getting an update. I'm guessing probably for the 21 model year, with an updated rotary controller for that.
I feel like with most of the GM interiors that the accountants get the last run through. That there's they just cut in places that it does make a difference. And regardless of how much this vehicle is, it still is supposed to be a Cadillac. And we've talked about this before, that who are good stewards of the brand. And Cadillac has not had a good steward of its brand in a while. And I'm hoping that the team that's in place now will be an advocate for Cadillac. It's Cadillac, for God's sakes, as we've talked about before.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, I'm looking at photos. I haven't seen one in person, but everything I see, you could switch the badge out. It could be a Buick. It could be a GMC. And I know that when you make cars at the scale that GM does, there's going to be some commonality. I get it. It's expensive to make its own set of switch gear for the transmission, surround and like the audio.
Yeah, but I mean, look at the difference between a Ford and a Lincoln now. There is not a single piece that's interchangeable.
Exactly. Yeah, but you know what? It was interesting being in the Navigator because, I won't talk about it that much this week because I also have a different car, but I like the Expedition better, although the materials are not quite as good. You can still get a pretty premium Expedition with the platinum trim, and B, the Lincoln, it looks really good. It presents well, certainly, especially in pictures. It looks great. Some of the materials don't feel good. Like there's a lot of chrome that is vacuum deposited on plastic, and it feels cheap, like to the touch. So there's that balance of how do you do that stunning design for the cost, and so I don't know. I mean, the Cadillac has certainly used some of that Lincoln swagger in its interior design. It doesn't. This car does not look special to me.
Yeah, no, I agree. I wouldn't disagree with that. See. I guess the other thing that I would that is more of a general GM complaint right now is just some of their decisions, some of their choices in terms of the standard equipment they're putting on cars. In an era when a lot of cars, a lot of very mainstream cars, Hondas and Nissans and Chevrolet or Toyotas and Hyundais and Kias are getting a lot of driver assist features as standard equipment now. Things like automatic emergency braking, lane keeping assist, and in many of those cases even adaptive cruise control as standard equipment. At prices well under half of what this vehicle costs. The fact that on the base XT4, so they have three main trim levels. The luxury is the base, and then they have this Y strategy, premium, lux, or sport as the two premium trims. On the base luxury version, you can't even get those features. They're not even available to buy. You have to step up to either the premium lux or the sport in order to get those kinds of active safety features. That's
a weird place to trim $5,000 out of the budget, because that's the difference is premium luxury and sport are 39.
Yeah, but the cost to the manufacturer is not anywhere close to that.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's like they've marked it up sort of purely for profit. And I think if you went down the list, like you'd find the $5,000 that they've discounted it with the features they've taken out. But who really wants that $35,000 XT4? And if it's going to feel that stripped, it's not going to present well. I'm sure that their plan is to sell more premium luxury and sport trims than anything else. Probably more premium luxury than anything else.
And a lot of those premium luxuries with the extra titanium package on top of that.
Yeah. It's just, I don't know. I mean, I see your point. Like, that's something that you could crow about. Like, hey, with standard features, standard safety, we're looking after you.
And isn't there a level of simplification of production as well? All cars get this.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Besides the fact that then you can crow about it, you simplify your production. It's becoming, there's some frustrations with General Motors because the competition, I feel like in many ways on the product side, the competition is really moving forward, and GM is doing a lot of stuff right on the financial side. But I feel like on the product side, there's just some opportunities that they are not keeping up with.
Right. So, that was $52,000 for that thing. When I came back from New York, I picked up the 2019 Ford Edge Titanium, which was very nearly as expensive. It was $48,000.
Wow.
Okay, so the Edge Titanium, though, like it's what? It's what?
It's a Ford. It's not even a Lincoln.
Yeah, but it's there's not really anything you want for on that. And
No,
it's got
that's true.
the EcoBoost V6, right? The
No,
2.7 liter.
actually, for 2019, so they did a mid-cycle update for the Edge this year, and only the ST is available with the turbo V6, the EcoBoost V6. All the
I
others,
very much liked the ST.
Yeah.
I liked that one a lot.
all the others have to make do with the mere 250 horsepower 2-liter turbo, which in comparison to the essential the same basic configuration in the Cadillac seemed like a much more refined engine than the one in the Cadillac. Certainly not as much of the noise and the sound was transmitted into the cabin as you're driving around. And it felt like a more pleasant place to be, and the Edge, for 2019, one of the things that they've changed, as they're doing with all their products as they update them this year, is Ford's adding their Copilot 360 driver assist package as standard equipment. So,
all that extra stuff that you pay more for on the Cadillac is included.
It's all included, even on the base model. So. You don't get with the base Copilot package, you don't get the radar and the adaptive cruise control, but you do get blind spot monitoring, the camera for lane keeping and automatic emergency braking, pre-collision assist, and what else? There's a couple of other features that I'm blanking on at the moment. Yeah,
you get stuff.
A bunch of other stuff. And then if you get the Copilot 360 Plus package, then that adds the radar for adaptive cruise control, and it also upgrades you from a basic lane keeping assist to a full-blown lane centering system. So it's closer to a level 2 partial automation system. So it's very similar in functionality to Nissan's ProPilot Assist, and it actually does a pretty good job of actually holding the car in the center of the lane. You still have to hold the steering wheel, but it does a pretty good job of keeping it centered without too much effort.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I think I used that on the ST that I had, and I thought it worked pretty well. And I was actually really impressed with how quiet they've made the Edge. I'm assuming that the premium trim is
the titanium's even more so. There's even you're going to get less of an exhaust note in the titanium than you will in the ST. It's not as quick, but it's quick enough.
I think it's probably quick enough.
Yeah. With 250 horsepower and I think 275 foot-pounds of torque. It's got plenty of performance. It's fairly roomy. It's a fairly big vehicle too.
It is. It's not exactly space efficient.
No.
But it's kind of big on the outside, and it's bigger on the inside than it used to be.
Yeah, it's it's decently large on the inside. It's got enough room for 5 adults in there, plenty of cargo space, and they. I'm trying to remember what. Lost my train of thought now. The thing I've always liked about the Edge, even with the first generation, was just kind of its overall stance, the overall proportions of it. And they carried that through to the second generation, which is based on the CD platform that they also used for the Fusion. And so, it's got that kind of wide-shouldered stance, looks very stable on the road, a little sportier looking even on the non-sporty versions. So I always kind of liked that approach that they took to the Edge, as compared to their other SUVs.
Yeah. I also, I liked how it went down the road. So I'm assuming with the Turbo 4, it takes it a little bit longer to wind up than it does with the Turbo V6 that the ST had. But once you get there, it felt pretty impressively solid and well disciplined with the body control and everything. So I was impressed with the Edge. I think that they've worked some magic on it, even though it's not the newest product. So
yeah, the titanium's a little bit softer than the ST. It's got a little more roll. Going over bumps, you can it soaks them up nicely, but you can when you're going around corners, you can feel it's still well controlled, but it's not as buttoned down as something like an ST would be.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Let's stay with the premium crossover note, because Rebecca, you're also driving a vehicle sort of in the same class as, well, at least as the XT4, as the Cadillac. You've had the Lexus NX200?
The NX300.
NX300.
Yes.
Pardon
and
me.
it's the F Sport edition. So it's sort of the sportier version.
Does it live up to the F Sport billing?
You know, it's weird. It does. It's got a 2.0 liter turbo 16 valve engine in it. It has a 6-speed automatic. And it was funny because when I was looking at the specs today, they kind of buried it on the website. So I had my sister look at the paper that I'm looking at. I said, is that a 6 or an 8? Because I don't remember the last time I saw a 6-speed automatic.
Yeah, well, see, they're burying it on the website because they're not exactly proud of it.
Exactly,
but,
right?
I mean, it's probably not a big deal. Like 6 speeds that's plenty.
It's totally fine. It's totally fine.
I think it's the last Lexus with a 6-speed.
I think it's got to be, right? I mean, it's rare now. So I like the vehicle. I feel like I've driven so many cars in the last couple of weeks, but I was surprised that the brakes are not as responsive as I would have liked, especially since it's this sporty package. They just seem to travel and take a long time to engage. And at first I thought, well, maybe it's because I've been driving some electric vehicles lately or hybrid, with more aggressive regenerative braking. But I think that's the only thing that I'm not that thrilled about with this vehicle. The NVH is quite good. It's a little bit, there's a little bit more tire noise than I was necessarily expecting. But overall, I think it's a really nice vehicle. I like the seats a lot. And to your point, Dan, that there's not 30 different ways to set them, but there's enough so that you're quite comfortable. And they have this really fun, I love bolstered seats. And, today I was kind of going through some more aggressive twisties, and they definitely felt like they were, providing the right amount of cushion and support for me. So I drove this to the airport to pick up my sister, brother-in-law, and my niece, and they're the same group that I drove to the airport.
You dropped them off,
right? I dropped them off in the Nissan Murano, and I picked them up in the Lexus. And it's so funny because I always have to send people pictures. I'm like, I'm going to be in this car today, Right. But so two things of note. The NX, even though it's a little bit smaller than the Murano, it just absorbed the luggage with equal elegance. So there was plenty of room in the back for, we had 3 carry-ons and 1 checked bag, and didn't have any problem putting them in. Same thing, passengers. But my brother-in-law commented, he said that the suspension was much stiffer on the NX, which I agree with him on that. This is set up in a more sporty way, but I quite liked it. I mean, it's been fun to drive. I've enjoyed it. I have not enjoyed the what do they call the HMI? The Inform, the touchpad. Yeah. I have not had good luck with that touchpad, and I don't know if you guys have had this, but it's not giving me haptic feedback. It's not giving me the types of that I would expect.
Yeah, you can turn the haptic feedback on and off, and I'm also driving a Lexus with that touchpad this week, which we'll get to. I also don't really like it. For some of the same reasons. It's just really, it's obtuse.
Yes.
But yeah, I had to spend a good 20 minutes sitting there like poking at it.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out I don't mind the haptic feedback when you touch it.
Right.
I don't want it to make a noise every time I brush it.
No, exactly.
So I had to shut that off.
Well, and of course I have an Android and it doesn't support Android Auto. So I haven't really been able to play around with it very much.
Yeah, that's true. It integrates phones okay.
Yeah, they just recently started adding support for CarPlay.
Yeah,
Toyota
it might be better with CarPlay. Like, I think that's probably better than Entune. Is to use CarPlay and the touchpad. I don't know.
But
have you tried that, Sam?
I've tried CarPlay. I haven't tried it in a Lexus yet. I'll be getting a Lexus UX in a few weeks, and so I'll try it out in that. But they did recently announce plans to eventually bring Android Auto to their vehicles as well, but not yet.
Okay. I like the NX a lot for smaller households. The RX is so ubiquitous and very much of kind of a mommy mobile. So I like this size. The UX is great too, but it's almost a little too small in some ways. This NX is sort of like the Goldilocks of like, of their crossovers. It's sort of this, I like the size. I like the fact that it can stretch to accommodate 4 to 5 people and some stuff very comfortably, but doesn't feel big. Like I don't feel like I'm driving a family car around. I feel like I'm driving a size appropriate vehicle. So this one starts at $40,025, which is a little bit more. I think the base NX is in the 36s.
Yeah, I think it's like 36.
Yeah,
right.
And then the one I have has the navigation system, which gives you this Lexus Inform app suite. And then it has park assist, that rear door with kick sensor, and then the premium sport pack that actually comes with heated and cooled seats, which were really, really nice. It has a moon roof, and then it has the blind spot monitoring with cross traffic alert, which, to what we talked about a few minutes ago, I really think should be standard. I don't think it should be part of a $2,865 package. On some of this stuff, I just think, I don't know that I would spring for this package, even though it has some really nice features in it. But that's a lot of money to add to this vehicle. So
yeah, I know that when I was buying, I didn't spring. I was like, no, I don't need that.
Yeah, I mean,
I have mirrors,
right? So
yeah, well, but there are times when mirrors don't help. Like when you're backing out of a parking space in a parking lot or a garage, the mirrors will show you what's right behind you, but it won't show you what's coming down the aisle. And that's where the cross traffic alert can really be a huge benefit.
I agree. I think that it's definitely beneficial. It's just for the money. I'm a cheapskate sometimes.
Yeah, but I agree. I think cross traffic alert. I had somebody. I think I said this last time. I had somebody contact me on my website, and one of the things I said was
What was the name of that site?
RebeccaDrives.com.
You're welcome.
I'll give you a drink later. But I said how I think that rear cross traffic alert is really important. But so anyway, the whole car comes out at with the $1,000 destination, $49,348, which is, we toss these numbers around. It's just incredible how expensive some of these vehicles are for that, 5-passenger size. But
yeah, but you can get like a 96-month loan. It's
96 months.
I think they're only doing the 96-month loans in Canada. I think in the U.S. it's still only 84 months.
Right. Well, those are metric months.
If I recall your last presentation at when you were still with Cox, Rebecca, I think that was what you guys said.
That's funny.
But it's true. Everything's expensive now, and we were discussing this a little bit earlier in Slack. Is size is sometimes used as shorthand for price or value, and that's not necessarily the best metric, because sometimes the smaller cars are still just as premium, and you're paying sort of for that miniaturization, I guess.
Yes.
So you just
I don't disagree, but I think the problem that we're running into, we're starting to see a real issue of affordability in general.
Yeah.
Regardless of what kind of vehicle you're talking about.
Oh yeah.
We'll talk about it next week. But this morning I got the Ford Ranger, and that's the one in my driveway is a $42,000 truck. And that just seems like a lot of money for a Ranger.
Yeah. Well, There is I have this feeling, just a gut feeling, because I haven't actually taken the time to look at any real numbers, but I have this feeling that there's a looming auto loan crisis if we're not careful.
It's interesting because I was reading on the Ford earnings, and they're actually seeing very little in delinquencies.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, no, it is. It is very good. But I mean, it's, the credit standards are pretty strict.
Did they? Was there any mention of what the average loan terms are though?
No, but I was just reading a summary.
Okay. Because
I took advantage of the fact that they will give you X amount of years on having a pulse, and I was like, let's stretch that thing out, man. I know I'm going to pay more in interest. That's fine. Because it keeps that monthly payment down, and that's the whole point of the longer terms that they're giving people. But that's the danger too,
right? Well, and that's the way over the last decade or two. People often shop for cars. They don't look at the sticker price. They look at what is their monthly payment, and whether they're buying or leasing. That's the factor that that's going to determine whether they drive off with a new vehicle or not.
Yeah. But back to the NX. I think it's a lovely size. I think it's the perfect size. I'm really interested in your take that, the RX feels too big. Because for me, the RX is probably the most underwhelming Lexus that I've driven.
Well, it's too big for a single person or a small household.
That makes sense.
It's totally appropriate for somebody with, one or two kids and certainly pets and stuff. So I'm just thinking of smaller households is where I like the NX, and the UX is fine if, I think if you have other cars, but I really like the size of the NX a lot.
And I like the design of the NX too.
Yes.
I think it's a nice interpretation. I think it's a better interpretation of Lexus's style than the RX. I've always thought the RX looked kind of awkward in its current form.
Yeah, no,
this one looks a lot better.
I agree. I think they've done a really nice, solid job. I was thinking though Lexus in many ways is an older brand now, and I would have a lot of concerns about an older buyer trying to figure out that Entune thing is that what it is? No, that's not right.
Entune.
Entune.
Enform.
Entune is Toyota.
Yeah, is the Toyota one. Is Enform. I would have concerns about them being distracted by it, trying to figure it out. It didn't have great voice recognition either, so that was a little bit of an issue. It was terrible trying to just tune the radio. It was just...
so that's a question, actually. I guess I should just look at it in pictures. How is the tuning set? Does it have that dual concentric volume and tuning knob together? Or is it two different controls?
I have to look and see. I don't remember. Because I try and do as much by voice as possible.
I see.
And, to see how that works. And it just, I had a real issue with it. I'm just looking now at it.
Yeah, it looks a little different. It looks like it actually has two knobs.
Yeah, I think it does. But again, when we jump in these and then start driving, it's always kind of trying to figure out, okay, what's, is this easy or not?
Yeah.
And then I also get frustrated when they don't have the Sirius XM. Because I use that a lot. And so, last night I was driving someplace and I was about to go on and report on Tesla earnings, and I needed to listen to stuff, and I couldn't listen to it because it was on Bloomberg Radio or something, and they didn't have that. But I think that people, whenever you pick up a new car, you have to spend that 20 minutes that you referred to, Dan, getting to know this and getting to know the system, because they think they're intuitive, but they're just not.
Did you use any of the apps from the app suite? Because it has Slacker and NPR One and other. You can add apps to it. Did you try any of that out?
I did not, in part because I knew it didn't work with Android, and so I didn't bother trying them. I'm certainly not one that goes really in depth with the HMI. I just try and get it to do the most basic things.
Yeah. Well, and I think you're right. Like we, Russell Datz
Yes.
from Volvo always tells me, like you guys, you car writers, you're the only people that complain so much about the HMI.
I don't believe that. I do not.
I can see his
that.
point. I can see his point because we're not buying the cars, so we're not trying to like make ourselves comfortable with the fact that we just spent money on this shit, but also we have such a short time with the cars that our initial and we're vocal, so our initial impressions are like, I can't figure this thing out, and so I'm going to be cranky about it, versus an owner who will spend some time and surprise and delight, or never spend any time.
But I don't think that it's unreasonable to expect the car to very quickly and very intuitively use voice control, which is why I try and use voice control, because it's a consistent metric for me.
Sure.
I want it to be able to call family members, call mom should not be an exotic request.
Dialing 911. No.
So I think that there's just certain things that a vehicle should be capable of doing. Tune to ESPN, or AM 880, which is our local weather and traffic here. There's
WCBS.
There's just exactly, there's just certain things that I feel like the vehicle, the HMI should do, regardless of the touch screens, regardless of the touch pads, any of that. And again, that's why I really like to use voice control, which arguably is supposed to be safer as well. But so the other vehicle that I've had this week is the...
Well, it's only safer if it doesn't make you more frustrated.
Well, exactly.
Well, you're not jabbing your finger at the screen and swearing. You're just swearing.
Very true. So for time's sake, I'm going to just tell you really quickly about the BMW i3 electric vehicle that I had with the range extender. Have you guys driven this thing?
I have.
Okay, so
I've driven the i3 a couple of times.
So
it's truly an exotic car.
So this is my first experience in it, and I picked it up in New York. I didn't have any information about it, and I get in it, and it has 68 miles of range, and I have a 42-mile drive, and I'm thinking, okay, that should be fine as long as I don't run into a lot of traffic and such. And then as I'm going, I realize that, okay, it has the range extender. I'm fine. So I get home, with no problems. And it was actually pretty fun to drive. It's pretty entertaining. But then, and then I decided to charge it. So the way that my plug, now I will say, I love the fact that it can just go into a standard plug. So my plug is right at the edge of my garage. And all of the other electric vehicles that I've driven, the charge port is at the front of the vehicle. So when you pull in, it's right there. But the i3 is in the back rear quarter panel of the passenger side, like where a gas tank might be. And the plug, the cord length is the length of the car.
Well, it's like when you have a toaster, right? When you buy a toaster, they give you this like 3-inch plug, because they don't want you to actually like plug it in and then drop it in the sink, or something. I feel like that's it. Like, now we don't want you guys getting in trouble with the car.
So
like, you get this cord and that's it.
So my option was to back up, which is quite dangerous in my driveway because it's a steep driveway, and I do everything I can to not back up. And so I decided I used one of my landscaping plugs. So I pulled down to the lower part. I have a lower driveway, and but even there, I had to basically, it's about a half a foot away from my walkway where to get the plug. And the cord that ended up being all buried in the ground, like laying on the ground. So it's basically sitting in the sink. So I was shocked and appalled at how short the plug was considering where the port is. It just doesn't make any sense to me. The gas tank is in the front quarter panel, but the port is in the back quarter panel. So charging it was just an enormous issue for me and really, really a pain. It was raining. I'm now, nowhere near my house. I'm, 50, 75 feet away and had to walk through the rain to and from the car. And it just wasn't a pleasant experience charging this thing. So that was my one gripe with it. And then the other thing I did was I drove it. I decided to take it. I had to go up to a meeting in about 70, almost 80 miles each way. So I knew I wasn't going to make it on electric. I didn't recharge it the night before because it really was pouring rain. So I left with about 40 miles of range and the range extender, which gave me another 70 miles. So I lose battery, or I use the battery up fairly quickly. And the first time that the 2-cylinder engine came on, I wasn't sure if it was a landscaping lawnmower, or if it was
motorcycle
the car.
engine.
So I'm literally on the phone with my sister, and I'm on the Merritt Parkway, and then I'm getting onto Route 8, another 2-lane highway. And I said, Wendy, I just hold on one second. I had to roll down my window because I really wasn't sure if they were mowing or if it was me. And unfortunately, it was me. And this 2-cylinder engine was awful.
All it really needs are a couple of straight pipes like a Harley, and it'll just you can idle like potato. It'll be fine.
Well, I mean, it literally is an R series motorcycle engine.
Yeah. It's the R series. So it's the flat twin.
Yeah. It's a flat twin, because that's the easiest one. That was the easiest one for them to package in there.
Well, so I end up having to stop for gas because I was down to about 30 miles. And I just don't know this car. I don't really know what that means. And I've got a good 15 more miles to go. So I end up stopping for gas, and it takes 0.75 gallons. And I get to the restaurant, have a very nice lunch. And as I'm driving back, I get down to 15, I think between 12 and 15 miles and left. And I stop for gas again and fill it up. This time it takes
with another 0.75.
With one and a half.
The range extender system really is intended literally as an emergency thing. It's not intended for. It's not like the Volt.
Yes,
where
exactly.
it's part of the primary powertrain. It's literally a backup. And now that they actually have the larger 40 kilowatt hour battery pack available, they have stopped offering the range extender as an option.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good to know because
boy, you would have been stuck.
Well, so when I wrote my review, I said, as somebody who's owned 3 BMWs and a Mini, the ultimate driving machine, this is not. I mean, it was.
So what's interesting about the i3, I think, is the concept and the execution, because it's all of BMW's expertise and prowess applied differently. Like if you look at the way the i3 is built and the details of it, that is an exotic car.
Yes. The interior is gorgeous. The houndstooth seats are amazing. It has this beautiful matte finish wood that's very Swedish looking. Cute bright blue seat belts. The suicide doors or the coach doors, whatever they call them, those were not ideal because I parked and there was somebody parked on either side of me, and then you can't really access them. You can't load the car easily if you're in a traditional parking space. But there's so much to like about the car. I mean, I think it's a beautiful interior, very intuitive. It was comfortable. The seats were nice. The voice recognition, all that stuff worked great. I didn't have any issues with that at all. It's just that it's not an easy car to live with unless you live in a very specific environment where you have a charging station that's right there at your disposal, and you never have to park between two cars.
Yeah, well, yeah. The thing about the i3 when it was originally conceived, the whole BMW i project was originally BMW's megacity project. It was BMW taking a look at as the world was getting more urbanized and we're getting these huge megacities of greater than 10 million population. They were trying to think about what kind of transportation do you need, what kind of cars do you need in that kind of environment, so they came up with a number of ideas. It needs to be electric, so that you minimize energy use and emissions, and it also needs to have a small physical footprint on the road so that it's not taking up the kind of space that a 7 Series would take up, and they didn't want to do something as tiny as the Smart, and they came up with the i3 as the original concept. I don't know if you remember, Rebecca, back around 2010 or so. The original concept was actually called the megacity concept.
Yes,
and that evolved into the i3, into the production i3.
Right.
And so it's got things like a carbon fiber structure, which is unique at this price point. Aside from the i3 and the i8, the only the other cars with carbon fiber, when this came out, were things like McLarens and exotic cars. So they did a lot of really neat things with this vehicle to try to achieve those goals. And it's probably going to be just a one generation vehicle. I don't think that they're going to do a direct replacement for the i3. Mm-hmm. But things that they learned from this project, BMW is translating into other vehicles, into their plug-in hybrid mainstream models and into their future electric vehicles.
Yeah, and I think that there's a lot of cool stuff about it. It's just the livability of it was tough. The pricing on it also, I mean, this one is $51,500, and then once you add in GigaWorld, Tech Driving Assist package, and a couple of other niceties, you're up to $58,695. And I think there's better choices.
Yeah, well, hey, it is still a BMW.
It is. It is still a BMW. It's just, I think there's better BMW choices as well.
Well, I think the way it let you down sort of shows how maybe it's not being sold properly, or maybe it's just because
it's designed for a different use case than what Rebecca was using it for.
Well, but
I think that's a misunderstanding that maybe the buying public is going to have too.
Yeah, but the fact that I could not go, that this round, 70 miles away I just don't think is very far. I went for lunch, and 70 miles and 140 or 150 mile round trip was a
that's a hell of a lunch.
Yeah, but it was a I didn't think that. I thought that was a good test. I thought it was a good reasonable test. It wouldn't be something I would do every day, but I thought it would be a good reason, that every once in a while where you may have to go a little bit further. And it just, it may not have been the case that they designed it for. And certainly the Volt, God rest its soul, was a lot better. But I just, again, I think that these are things that I do think that the general public does need to be aware of, that this is not a car that you're going to be able to use in a number of situations.
That's absolutely true. And, I think if you think of it, as a car, if you're driving around, if you live in Munich and you're commuting around Munich, and then if you need to go to Stuttgart, or to Ingolstadt or to Frankfurt,
well, you hop on Das Train.
Exactly. You hop on
Right.
the train to make that trip. You leave the i3 behind,
right,
and you hop on the train. Here in the U.S., it's a less ideal application for that kind of vehicle.
Exactly. I mean, I would love this car in California. If you're on the 405 and you get the green and you get the high occupancy vehicle lane sticker, and you're going back and forth to a place where you can charge it back up again, because Sam, you're absolutely right. That engine was for emergency purposes only, and that became very clear as the more that I had to use that to run on, it was very clear that this was not how the vehicle was designed, not the purpose of the vehicle. But again, if it was something that I didn't think should not have been out of the bounds of comfort of this car, and it definitely was. That kind of trip definitely was. So it was a good test. I mean, I was thrilled to be able to use it. It's still a looker. People still look and turn around and want to see it. And, I actually really liked the front and rear hinge doors for loading and unloading. Unless you're parked between two cars, then it became very difficult. But, there was a lot of positives about it. And again, the interior was fabulous. It's just that I think that when it comes to electric vehicles, the technology is getting so much better so quickly that the i3 is pretty old at this point.
Yeah. Well, some of that stuff has to actually, I think, age for a little bit longer than the normal car model cycle. The i3 was such a fresh and different idea and different execution that it's still relevant on the market, I think.
Yes, it's just you do have to have a very specific driving plan for it.
Yeah.
as was the case with a lot of the first generation of these modern EVs, where they were shorter range. You had, before buying one, you need to make sure that it fit your lifestyle,
right?
Because it's not a vehicle for everybody,
right? Exactly.
Now, as we're getting into these longer range EVs, with 200 to 250 miles of range, that's far less of an issue. And also, since charging infrastructure is becoming more and more readily available, especially DC fast charging, becoming more available, it's less of an issue for people.
For sure. Yeah. So, again, I was thrilled to be able to drive it, and it was a lot of fun. But it was just, it has a limited use to it. So
what did you think of the braking characteristics with the strong regen?
I didn't have any issue with it at all. I got used to it very quickly. I did a lot of one foot braking and coasting and stuff. So I thought it was pretty good, actually.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I like it too. It's something, the first time I drove, the original Mini E, that was the first time I drove something that had that really strong regen like that. And I've always really liked that, EVs that have that kind of behavior.
Yeah, I do too. I will say that one of the unique parts about the Audi e-tron is that it doesn't have that significant you won't get that sudden kind of, it's almost like the car takes a deep breath, and you're not going to have that. So I think that they're starting to get away from that because people are not comfortable with it. But I think once you get used to it and it doesn't take you by surprise, I think it's pretty cool. So yeah, I got used to the braking very, very quickly. As I said, I picked it up in Manhattan and immediately got it onto the West Side Highway, and was in some moderate stop and go traffic, but it was, I quickly got used to driving it, which was nice. It was a car that you can get used to very quickly. Didn't have any issues with the HMI at all. It worked very easily for me. Voice recognition was good. Again, there were a lot of things that I really, really liked about it. It just, the charging situation was again, something that you have to be very cognizant of when you're looking at this vehicle. Where are you going to charge it? How are you charging it? You can't necessarily, my setup here at home was not ideal, but mostly because of the length of the plug. And I assume that you're able to buy, a longer plug, I would hope. But, again, it's just, does this fit your lifestyle? And you need to make that evaluation before you buy it.
Well, it's a city car for city dwellers, I think, first and foremost.
But where do city people plug it in?
Well, that's what I was going to say. If you live in an apartment or a condo, our
There's
garages,
the fundamental problem.
Yes.
right? Our garages don't necessarily have that common charging that you may find in European cities that have adopted it more. They've embraced it more.
Right.
So there's still infrastructure challenges to it. I'm pleased that the range extender worked for more than its emergence. But yeah,
It's like a space saver spare tire.
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
Oh, you can torture those things.
Exactly. So, Dan, what are you driving this week?
Yeah, so this week I have a Lexus ES350. We don't need to talk about the Navigator. I had that a while ago, and I
you already got in your complaints about the seats. So.
Yeah, so I'm good. We can move on. I have an ES350. It's not the F Sport. It's just a sort of, I guess it's not the base trim because it's about $60,000. But this is the first year for this new ES350. It's moved to the I think Global Architecture K platform, which is a new platform that I think the Avalon is also on.
And that, I think, is a derivative of TNGA.
Yeah, it feels like it from behind the wheel because it's so good to drive. And that's what I guess my biggest impression of the ES350 is this model has always been sleepy and dull and just, it's the Buick of the Lexus lineup. And I don't say that to say that Buicks are bad, but it's like, it's the car you graduate to when you have retired and you don't want any problems. It's a luxury car that it's a luxury Camry and now it's a luxury Avalon, but it's this generation, which is all new, really, really surprised me because it's fantastic to drive. And from an enthusiast perspective, it feels really good. It made me think of the idea of like comprehensive excellence, where some cars have great powertrains, some cars handle really well, but they don't ride well. This ES has sort of all of that. It rides really well. It handles well. It has, sport and eco modes. You can change the character of how it behaves. The interior materials are really good. I really like the design of all of the ergonomics. I love the exterior design. It has a slightly smaller version of the Lexus murder grille, which is nice. It's a really, really comprehensive update that feels very good from behind the wheel. It's luxurious. It even smells good inside. The leather, they make a big deal about their semi-aniline leather. Right. Which all that means is that it has dye through most of the layers versus only being dyed on the top. But it's a really, really good car. And I feel like in the mid 50s, or slightly under $60,000, it actually feels like it's very reasonably priced. It's got the 3.5 liter V6 that is muscular. So that is a great engine. It is very comfortable going down the road. This one has the radar cruise control, and even that's pretty good. It gets a little bit touchy in stop and go. It jams on the brakes a little harder than I would prefer, but no, it's beautifully finished. It looks good. It feels good to drive. Even down to the steering effort, the amount of torque you have to put in, it just it feels real good to drive. And some of that is they made specific changes to make it feel better from behind the wheel. They gave it more caster angle, which is one of the tricks that BMW does, is their cars have more caster angle, which is the struts. If you have a strut front end, are the caster is the angle that they lay backward at. So the more caster angle you have, the more it wants to center and just sort of lock on to straight ahead. it feels really good. They added a couple of degrees there. It's longer, lower, wider, so it's a very 50s kind of thing. But it pays off. It feels very good to drive. It's maybe a little bit nervous at the handling limits. Like if you try to push it, it's going to feel a little floaty, even on higher performance tires. This one says it has a sticker on the window that says like, hey, you're probably only going to get about 20,000 miles out of these tires. It doesn't. I feel like they made a poor choice because the tires don't feel like high performance tires, and I don't know. I didn't take note of what they actually are, but it could do with the set of Pilot Sports. But there's nothing to complain about here other than Entune, which is garbage, especially with that touch pad thing. Like, no, get that out of the car.
So, what do you think some of the biggest differences are in terms of what they did to make this so much better than previous versions?
I think that the structure is a lot more rigid. Okay. Which lets them tune that suspension so that it has more control. It can be more supple. Toyota always plays this game of how few spot welds and pieces of structure can we put in. And a couple of Camrys ago, I think they figured out like, hey, we need to add a few more welds to it in a few places, and that paid dividends. It stiffened the car up a bit. And I think this is the same case where they've moved to a newer architecture that they're trying to move all of their cars to. I think Sam's right. I think this is just a bigger version of the TNGA platform, which is in the RAV4. I think they're even moving. They will be moving the Corolla to it if it hasn't yet.
I think the new Corolla, is already on TNGA.
Right, and you're seeing raves about that too. Any TNGA car, the Prius is on it now. Any one of those that I've driven, I've been very impressed by. And the older platforms are just not. They don't have that sort of feeling to them. They feel like a spreadsheet car. Like we went down and we checked all the boxes and it has all the things. It met all of its program objectives. It's a car versus, this new generation of Toyotas that feels like it has some soul to it, which was always the complaint about the ES. It feels soulless. And this is a gold Lexus ES. It's like it doesn't get more stereotypical than that. It's a really, really nice car. They've upped their game with the materials inside. The ES and the RX have always been somewhat underwhelming in the materials that they've used. It's better. It has bamboo wood, real metal. Leather's very nice. The design and layout is nice. I think making it a little larger, because it's not Camry size now, it's Avalon size. So there's a larger back seat and a larger trunk. That stretches out the wheelbase a little bit and makes it. They have also, made the wheelbase longer, which pays dividends in how it rides and handles too. So it's just, I think it's the right car for their buyer, and even an enthusiast driver like myself. I fancy myself an enthusiast. Can be satisfied by it, and that's something that the earlier versions didn't do.
Cool. No, it sounds great. I'm glad to hear Lexus is getting a little bit more mojo in their performance and the experience in the vehicle.
Yeah, I hope you guys get in it soon and we can compare notes. I didn't drive the hybrid, so that's something that I'm curious to try. A lot of the Lexuses I get to drive are the hybrid versions, and I feel like that powertrain dings the experience a little bit, because it's still, you feel it flopping around, starting up, shutting off. It has some of that funky reaction to the accelerator. It's a 4-cylinder versus the 6, so the NVH is different. The ES350 with the V6 is stellar. It's just very good. And that feels like the weirdest thing ever to say. So let's just carry on. Let's hit some topics, because we've talked about cars a lot, or the cars we're driving a lot. So the first story on our list here is Ford and Rivian managed to do what GM and Rivian couldn't do, and so they're gonna tie up and make some trucks or some cars or something.
Sam, you had an interesting perspective on this, where General Motors had been in the running.
Yeah, GM was in talks to invest in Rivian at the same time that Amazon made their investment about a month or so ago, and GM walked away from the deal. From what I've heard from a couple of sources, apparently GM basically wanted to make it more of an exclusive arrangement with Rivian. They didn't want Rivian to continue offering their platform to other companies, and so GM walked away from that deal. And apparently, as soon as the GM talks broke down, Ford apparently stepped right in, and they got this deal done fairly quickly in just a few weeks. And they're investing $500 million into Rivian. And also, they're going to use the Rivian skateboard platform for a future Ford electric vehicle. They haven't said what that vehicle is going to be, only that it's not going to be the F-150, because they've already got an electric F-150 in development that's coming out in a couple of years, and probably in 2021 or 22. And so this is going to be something different. My guess is that it will probably be a next generation electric transit, or possibly even maybe for the next generation of their autonomous vehicle platform that they're developing. Their first generation AV is going to be using a hybrid powertrain. But they could very well switch to electric, but that's probably going to be a little further out. So something like an electric transit would probably be the most likely choice for their first vehicle with Rivian, and maybe even you've got the possibility of Ford building Amazon's next generation delivery vehicles based on the Rivian platform. Ford develops the rest of the vehicle with Amazon, and uses the Rivian platform to support it.
Yeah. So I have a remedial question. Rivian's been around for 10 years. Where have they been?
They've been hiding.
They pivoted a couple of times. Their original plan was actually doing high efficiency gas engined vehicles, like city cars.
Oh.
And they ultimately pivoted and ended up with the idea of doing electric trucks, pickup trucks and SUVs. And that they got to that point about 2 or 3 years ago. And got into the development of this vehicle that they first showed off at the LA Auto Show in November.
Right.
And then they had it in New York last week as well. The R1T, which is the pickup truck,
right, and
the R1S SUV. And they've developed all their own stuff for that. Their own platform. I'm not sure who they're using for battery cells yet, but their propulsion system and everything else is all developed in-house.
Right, and they bought the Mitsubishi plant in Normal, Illinois. So they have a
which they probably got for basically nothing.
Yeah, I think it was $16 million, which is basically nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just have to kick it out.
Exactly.
They've made a lot of really smart moves, staying in stealth mode until they were ready to show pretty well-developed vehicles. Like, I think they actually introduced the trucks at the show later than they wanted to be introducing anything. But they did that sort of so that they're not another vaporware company. They waited until they had funding, right? I forget exactly what they waited
for. But they had some funding, when they showed off the truck in November, but not a lot. Certainly not enough to actually get them to production. And it was after they publicly showed their vehicles that they started getting into some serious talks with new investors. And that's when Amazon stepped in, and then now Ford as big investors. So between these two most recent rounds, they've raised $1.2 billion, which should be more than enough to finish the development on the R1T and the R1S, and get the plant tooled up to start production. And I think there's a number of advantages that both Rivian and Ford get out of this deal. For Rivian, having Ford and potentially others use their skateboard platform. The most expensive part of an electric vehicle is that platform. With the battery, the motors, the power electronics. That's the single biggest cost in there. And if you can start to get scale from that, start to scale up the volumes, you can drive the cost down, and you can also spread the R&D cost over more vehicles. So, to have Ford step in and say, yeah, we'll use this platform for an upcoming vehicle, that helps Rivian because, now, instead of producing maybe, let's say 30 or 40,000 vehicles, in the first couple of years, now they're potentially looking at 100 or 200,000 of these platforms that might get built and sold. And spread, and same thing, with Amazon coming in. So they get, a lot more volume, and that drives down both the cost both for them to use that platform for their own vehicles, as well as for all their partners. And then, for Ford, same thing, it allows them to, kind of hedge their bets a little bit on, which EV platforms they want to use or which EV technology they want to use. So now and to not have to pay the full expense of developing that platform.
Yeah.
Well, there's a couple of interesting details to the whole deal. First is that with Joe Henrich. Yeah, you know all these people. I'm just I read their names and try to pronounce them. So he joins the Rivian board.
Right. So Joe is currently the president of Ford. Actually, I guess they just did a reshuffle of Ford management a couple of weeks ago. So he is essentially now overseeing all of Ford's legacy business. All of the traditional Ford businesses. And Jim Farley, who was previously, when he first started at Ford, he ran marketing for Ford. He's now overseeing all of essentially the future business, the mobility, the AVs, all of that stuff is under Farley, and all of the traditional business of designing and manufacturing vehicles that they can sell for a lot of money and use to fund all the stuff that Farley is going to be leading that's all Jim's area, Joe's area, Joe Henricks. And he's also joining the board of Rivian. And, Joe comes from a manufacturing background.
Right. And so that means that Rivian's not going to flunk out on their commitment to Ford, because he's going to help them figure out how to, because that's where a lot of these EV startups have issues, is saying, yeah, we've got this really great thing, but we can't manufacture it at scale. We don't know how to set up assembly lines. We don't know how to make this actually work. Can you help us out? And so I think that's going to really work well. Even Joe says, they have a lot to learn from Rivian, which that was interesting to me. Him saying like, yeah, well, we're working on EVs. We got a lot of experience with it at Ford, but we also have a lot to learn. I'm like, well, which is it? That seems like it's kind of both. Like, I think they're looking forward to learning from a nimble, smaller startup that doesn't have some of the top heaviness that Ford does. And so they can make moves, and they think differently, not necessarily better or worse, but differently. And I think that's maybe what he means when he's saying that they have things to learn from each other. It wasn't really delineated. But so I'm curious about that. The other thing that I picked up on too was that, RJ Scaringe from Rivian said that they're making several models for other companies. And so that is just sort of like a tasty little morsel of like, wonder who that is. Are they large? Are they small? Are they other EV companies? Are they other automakers? And how does that
Well, yeah, when they first announced, when they first came out of stealth in November, they said that they were going to make that skateboard available to anybody that wants to use it. So, I don't know if RJ actually said that they're going to that they have deals to do that, but they want to do, or they're working on those deals.
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting deal. And I do think that GM's probably kind of upset.
Yeah.
I mean, it provides. Well, the Amazon investment was huge for Rivian, but I think that pairing up with Ford really gives them a level of legitimacy. And to your point, Dan, about the expertise in production that, a company like Tesla, for instance, could have really used had they been open to listening.
I was going to say, it's probably not for lack of offering.
Right, exactly. I mean, if they,
I think there were plenty of people with manufacturing expertise that went in and out of Tesla over the last several years. None of them stayed around long enough to actually accomplish anything because Elon was not willing to listen.
Yes, exactly. So I think that Rivian has a very different management structure, and I think RJ is really he's eager to learn, and so I think that alone will bodes very well for Rivian.
And speaking of Tesla,
I didn't know if we wanted to say more about Rivian or not, but yeah, there's a lot.
Well, I mean, right now, I mean, there's not a whole lot more to say. We don't have a whole lot more concrete information, so yeah.
All right.
Let's pound on Tesla for a while.
There's a lot just happened with Tesla. They had their dog and pony show, which didn't seem to move the stock price.
Oh, it moved the stock price. Well, in the direction that Elon wanted.
Actually, that's true. Yes, they lost $700 million.
Well, and first, they had their autonomous day on Monday,
but only for investors,
right? And then that's when they announced the 1 million robo taxis by the end of 2020. So I did a quick little calculation, and I figured out that it's 88 Mondays till the end of 2020. and I don't know, I perseverated on Monday because it was announced on a Monday, and I just thought it'd be kind of interesting to see. But I don't understand this whole thing of we're going to make the cars autonomous, and then owners of these vehicles are going to put them into this robo-taxi fleet and make between $10,000 and $30,000.
And we're going to insure it. We're going to insure it because nobody else is going to insure it. And
yes,
also, owners are going to be okay with just like sending their car off just like, okay, you have fun while I'm at work. Like, I don't even send my kids off like that.
I was not aware that like your typical Tesla owner wanted to become an Uber driver. I just didn't get it.
Well, they don't, but that's the beauty of this. They don't have to be an Uber driver. The car can be its own Uber driver.
I don't even want somebody walking that close to my car.
Come on.
Well, essentially what we're looking at here is something like Turo. Are you guys familiar with Turo?
Oh yes, because I'll tell you my one experience. Well, I have multiple experiences, but I will tell you of an experience that I had. I won't give you any details, but that the Turo car, at one point, the front bumper was taken off so that they could mount a camera onto the car, and then the suction cups from another part of the camera broke the windshield. And this Turo car was not returned in similar condition.
That sounds bad.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So for listeners that are not familiar with Turo, this is a platform that basically lets you make your car available for people to rent. It's kind of like Airbnb.
It's Car-B&B,
yeah, essentially. So if you've got a car that's not being used much and you want to make it available for people to rent, you can put it on Turo, and if somebody's in the area where you are, you can go on the Turo app or on the website, look for a car in a particular location. You can see all the prices, and if you look, you'll see there's actually a lot of Teslas available on Turo today, and.
Well, yeah.
What Elon is proposing is essentially like that, except that the cars will be self-driving. And when somebody wants a ride, the car will come and pick them up, take them to where they want to go, drop them off, and then go on and pick up somebody else. So kind of a mix of Uber and Turo and autonomous vehicles.
And I love his vision. I continue to appreciate and respect this vision. It's the timelines that drive me crazy.
I don't even like the vision. If your whole mission is some sort of environmental stewardship, the fact that you're contributing to congestion is bad. You're going to say like, oh, we're going to have our cars automatically drive and continue to contribute to congestion all day instead of just at rush hour. Like,
that's where the key issue here is, in how you execute this, because if you just randomly put vehicles out there, and say they're made available on the Tesla network, and they're sitting in somebody's driveway, and somebody needs a ride, so it's got to go drive however many miles to pick that person up, take them to their destination, and then drive back home again or drive somewhere else, then that is a problem, because you're probably going to have a lot of deadheading miles. Most of the companies that are in this space, working on autonomous mobility systems, autonomous ride-hailing systems, what they're looking at, what they're trying to do is develop their logistics platform to minimize those deadheading miles. Because if you're running a fleet, the thing you don't want is you don't want your car driving around empty, because then it's not making you any money and it's costing you money. So you need to make sure that every mile it drives, it's doing something productive. And this is where I suspect that, well, there's also the whole problem with the fact that Teslas are not actually full self-driving, and that may or may not happen someday.
Details.
But aside from that, there's the whole optimization problem of how you deploy these vehicles, and that has the potential to really be an issue.
Yeah.
I also think that maybe a more lucrative thing for these cars to be doing while they're not being driven by their owners is like just mine for Bitcoin or something. Like, they're connected to the internet. They've introduced this new fancy chip, right? That was part of the thing too. Like, they developed the self-driving chip, which I saw the internet pile on and say like, well, NVIDIA and Intel have also been working on self-driving chips, and this upstart Tesla, who's not a chip company, is going to come in with a less powerful chip and say that it's going to be the best thing ever for self-driving. And I think that...
Well, there was this other upstart company that had never designed its own chips before that a few years ago, started designing its own chips for its phones and tablets. And lo and behold, Apple is now considered one of the top chip design companies in the world.
Well, that's what I was going with that. Is like you have those sort of entrenched players, and they make their DSP or their processors for a variety of uses, and then they sort of make them work for that application.
They're not optimized for this application of
so
autonomous
if you're gonna build a board or a chip or whatever, like, it's not just a chip, right? It's like a whole ecosystem, like a whole system. If you're gonna do that, you're gonna optimize it for that one purpose. It's a single purpose machine. So it doesn't really matter if it is less powerful or more powerful. What really matters is its performance. And
well,
so
it's not just performance, but also power efficiency, the performance per watt,
and durability, and all of those things that really, really matter. So, like, if you can do that with a bunch of
is very much a non-trivial issue. The durability, especially in an automotive environment, making automotive grade chips is actually a very difficult problem.
Oh, it sucks. Yeah, it's a terrible environment. Like, it's full of vibration and temperature differentials
and electromagnetic interference.
Yeah, it's just a crappy place for electronics. So, I'm curious to see how that shakes out and how it works, because for all that everybody likes to just take shots at Tesla, like they're working hard on stuff, and so that's actually really, really interesting. And so I want to know more about that. There was a lot of shooting from the hip and made up numbers and just bad behavior.
Well, that's par for the course for Elon. Though.
Yeah. I mean, just
he had his team come up. He had a couple of different people come up and talk about the chip design, the software, their testing, and he kept he was sitting there on the stage and he kept getting up and interrupting his people, to interject his own ideas into what they were saying.
Yeah. So the demagoguery is really the issue. And so that's what so since this dog and pony show, they got dinged, 700 million in valuation. And
no, the 700 million is how much they lost in the first quarter.
Oh, was it? I thought their stock price dropped. Okay, so clearly I don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, the stock price dropped even more than that.
Because then they reported earnings yesterday on Wednesday, and so the autonomous day was Monday, and then they reported earnings on Wednesday, and that's when they missed estimates. They were not profitable. Their cash position dropped significantly because they had to pay a convertible bond of $900 million. And then there was very little discussion as to how they were going to shore cash back up. And then Elon also opened up the possibility of another round of raising capital, which had not been really on the table before. So I think the stock closed under $250 for the first time in over a year. So it's
a week ago, as we record this, their stock was at $273 a share. And it closed at $247 today.
That's so. I'm Ford reported their earnings as well, and I have no idea if this means anything or not. But I just thought it was interesting that Tesla has about $2.2 billion in cash on hand, and Ford has about $22 billion cash on hand. It was 10. I think as Ford has $24.2 billion cash on hand. So it was more than 10 times what Tesla has.
And what is it? The market capitalization?
Oh, well, Tesla I think far exceeds because Ford's trading at $10.
Right. And so that to me that's silly. Like Ford's sitting on a pile of cash and they're better managed.
This is why I'm not a stock analyst, because I don't understand how that valuation of Tesla makes sense.
Well, the premise is that the stock market values companies based on what they think they're going to do in the future as opposed to what they're doing today.
Yes.
And so, Tesla's crazy stock valuation has been based on the presumption that they're going to succeed in all the things that they've claimed.
Listen, let me tell you, Tesla in the future is going to go bankrupt. That's what they're going to do.
My question is, at some point, though, how do you not have some basis in fact and past performance influencing
I think that
growth?
We've seen that this week where other analysts and other folks who watch Tesla have adjusted their position and said, because that's the whole short versus long thing, right? There's a lot of people who were very bullish on Tesla now starting to pull back and saying, like, look, this is a hot mess. And so I'm going to have to suggest that maybe you don't put your money here right now.
Yeah. I mean, at some point, because then he started to talk about production of the Model Y, and they started talking about this new insurance company. I mean, there's a lot.
Don't forget the semi and the pickup.
Semi and the pickup, right. There's a lot of shiny objects out there. And I think that...
Where's the money for all that going to come from?
Well, exactly. I think that people, at some point, you just have to stop and say, what about today? And what about the operations side of this business, the cash flow, the investments that are required, all those different things? At some point, you just have to stop and say, what is going on? And again, I am very much a fan. But you got to stop and explain.
Right. And this has always been my complaint about the company, is not that, not that I disagree with what they're trying to achieve, but rather, that, Elon, while he's got great ideas, is a terrible manager. And this is a very poorly run company.
Yes.
A prime example, one of the items in their first quarter financial report, talked about, that they expect to, to deliver about 400,000 cars, between 360 and 400,000 cars in 2019. But they expect to produce significantly more than that because, they're going to have cars in transit, cars that are going through customs in China and elsewhere. And I'm thinking, no, this is idiotic because, if you've got your systems working right, yes, there's always going to be some amount of your product that is in inventory, that is in transit somewhere, that is somewhere between the factory and the customer taking delivery, whether that's in the stores or on a ship or on a plane or, whatever. There's always going to be some inventory there. But at some point you need to get to an equilibrium where, there's cars that are built, 1 month. They may not get delivered to a customer for another 4, 6, 8 weeks, depending on where it's going to, and so there's going to be some amount of product that's in transit, but ultimately the number of vehicles that you actually sell and deliver to consumers has to roughly match what you're producing. It's just that the cars that you're delivering weren't produced on the same day or weren't produced on the same day they were delivered. There's a flow through this whole system, and Tesla just kind of bounces around all over the place. They struggle to make cars, and then they push out a whole bunch of cars in the last 3 weeks of a quarter, and then try to push them to customers. And they complain about having cars in transit. It's like, no, it doesn't matter if they're in transit. Everybody's got cars in. Every manufacturer's got cars in transit. Apple has millions of iPhones in transit. It doesn't matter what you're producing. There's something in transit somewhere, but you have to balance your production and your sales.
I agree. I mean, the other thing that I calculated out was that they sold 63,000 vehicles in the first quarter, and they're looking at still selling. They want to still sell, I think, 400,000, which means selling like 40,000 a month going forward. I can't get any of the math to work with the projections. And I also don't totally understand why people don't push back more on some of these calls to have them explain, just as you said, Sam, like it's the vehicles in transit, everybody that's a line item. That's an expected line item. And so they're always held to a different set of standards than other manufacturers. And at some point, I just feel like they need to start being held to industry standards and not tech startup standards. I don't know when that will happen, but
once all the parts are brought up by the various parties that attend the fire sale. And I think that's the most frustrating thing. It's just there's all kinds of potential here. There's very good, dedicated people. The reporting about the organization has been astounding this year. Like Reveal did a whole series. Have you listened to that? I think they did at least a couple of episodes. Okay. So they talked to Reveal as an NPR show, and they have a podcast, and it's Center for Investigative Reporting. Excellent. So they looked into Tesla and what happens with employees who get injured, and they have sort of like Tesla follows its own drummer regardless. They follow their own drummer with taking care of injured employees, and they have their own sort of Tesla protocols. It's like, this is how we do it. And
exactly.
Of course they're not correct. The people really, really pay for it. So it's an organization that has a lot of potential that is just squandered. And I think that's the most frustrating thing, and why we keep banging on it a bit. Like I said, I'm really intrigued with their autonomous driving chip, and that the system, they're making some claims that are really interesting, and I want to see.
Yeah, and if that chip lives up to it, it should be very impressive.
Yeah,
but at the same time, even if you've got something that's really good, you need to also, you don't need to misrepresent what your competitors are doing. Like during the presentation, they talked about the NVIDIA Xavier chip and its performance. They Elon said it only had 21 trillion operations per second.
NVIDIA said, "No, we don't think so, sir."
No,
pretty quickly.
It's 30. And they also have the Pegasus system, which is 320 teraops.
Yeah, so that's the kind of crap that just gives them a bad name, and so we should just move on. Next week there'll be more stuff to talk about until something happens. At a certain point they'll either be activist investors, not sure, but you can only do so many capital raises before.
Well, and it's widely thought that part of the reason why they haven't done any additional capital raises over the last year and a half is because they can't, because they've been under SEC investigation, and so they can't get They can't get registration approval to actually sell more shares.
Yeah, and they continue to be under SEC investigation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So when you keep saying stupid crap, that's what happens. You should just shut up. Seriously, just go hang out.
Get off Twitter.
Yeah, go hang out with the stars that you clearly want to hang out with, and just leave the company alone. People are strange. All right, let's see what else is on our list here. I just wanted to touch on some car nerd stuff, just briefly, because one of the things that I really noticed from watching the coverage of the New York show, which I could not be at, unfortunately, because I had to be actually at my day job.
You were locked in a closet writing proposals.
Right, doing day job things. Everybody sort of focused on like, oh, here's the new X or Y, and it looks great. Let's talk about the looks. And some of that is just the nature of the car show environment, where basically you see the new thing and your initial reaction is to what's in front of you. So it's visceral, it's visual. You get to go poke and prod at it. Maybe, you can steal a couple of knobs because apparently that's what everybody does.
Only during the public days.
Yeah. And it's somebody in a nice suit from the auto manufacturer stands up there and gives you the press release for the most part. And you kind of miss out on some of the important details. Like I was talking about with the ES350, like the important details of that car are really in how it's made, the techniques of how it's put together. And a lot of energy is expended now on powertrains. We talk especially about EVs and stuff, but really I think one of the most intriguing areas of the business is how the hell the cars are actually put together, like how you bend the metal and fasten it all to each other. There's been, widespread use of structural adhesives over the last few years. So that's something I think that we, at least Sam, you, because you're an engineer, you probably understand it better. But we could maybe cover a little bit and just sort of explain a little bit about some of this stuff that makes cars now so good and so much different than how they used to be.
Yeah, well, one of the key things about modern vehicles is that the structures have gotten really incredibly strong. When the first almost new vehicle that I owned when I was in college was a 1984 GMC S15 pickup truck. And I remember one time, I got a flat tire and, had to jack it up to, change the tire. And as I'm jacking it up, I'm looking down, along the length of this compact truck and just watching as the frame is twisting, and I'm seeing, the difference in the angle between the bed and the cab of this relatively small pickup truck, and it was crazy how much it twisted, how much it flexed. And I also another one I remember. I don't know if you guys ever had a chance to drive the early '90s Mercury Capri, the little convertible that they developed with Mazda. That came out about the same time as the original Miata. And that was another example of a little floppy flyer. The thing you could. I mean, as you drove down the road, you could just feel the thing flexing around you. It was crazy. And when you drive a modern car, it's nothing like that. It's so solid. The structures are so solid. In part because they have to meet these really stringent occupant safety standards. Crash protection standards. But also because when you have a solid structure to attach your suspension to, that gives you more freedom to soften up the suspension to give you better ride quality and better handling at the same time, because you can control where those wheels are going to be relative to each other, because that structure is not moving. When the structure is flexing, then you have no idea where the wheels are going to be, so you got to stiffen everything else up.
It's the fifth spring.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I never had the pleasure of an S10 or S15. That's I mean, those things had rust like from the factory, but
mine didn't. But they were dirt cheap.
Yeah, that's true. And they were dirt cheap because they were simple, old school technology, right? Like that was
way old school.
It was a frame, like a Conestoga wagon, and a body plopped on top. And as you go down the road, like everything moves around kind of on its own rhythm. That doesn't even happen now on body on frame pickups. No. Like they're just tight. They shake a little bit, but other than that, they're solid as can be. The frames are real beefy, and I do think you were talking about it a little bit before we started the episode, where you had the chance to go, I guess in the early 90s, go over to Lotus and check out some of the things that they were doing. And they were the first ones to use actually glue to hold the cars together, which sounds crazy, right? Like, oh, we're going to glue these things together. That can't be solid as welding or whatever. It's everywhere in every car now, and you'd be surprised how ridiculously strong it is. And it allows them to do things like put aluminum next to steel, although there's also some technology like GM has where they can actually weld them to each other or something. I forget.
Which I still don't quite understand how they manage that successfully. But
I don't get it either. But so you've got these different materials that you're trying to put together, right? Or you're making a honeycomb or a sandwich of multiple materials. So think about the floor of a supercar, or even just that i3 in some ways has a lot of this stuff in it. So the glue can bond those together and make it really, really rigid. And that's one way where they can make the cars really tight, and the glue can then take up the I guess it's creep or just dimensional changes from when it gets hot or cold, right?
Well, there's a bunch of advantages you get from using adhesives in that way. One is one of the traditional approaches for joining a lot of the panels that make up stamped panels that make up a unibody structure, or a body structure of a vehicle, is spot welding. So you go along and you do a bunch of spot welds. Well, the problem is you're joining these pieces of metal together in isolated locations along this seam. And so you don't have as much strength there. You don't have as much material that's actually joined together. And, so spot welding is quick and easy and relatively cheap, but it's not going to be as strong. If you can put a bead of adhesive along that entire seam, now you're spreading out the load over a much larger area, and you make the whole structure much more rigid. And another cool application of this that I saw a couple of years ago when I went for a tour of Honda's Performance Manufacturing Center in Ohio, where they build the NSX, is on the NSX structure. You mentioned joining the similar materials. One of the problems if you try to join aluminum and steel, or any two different metals together, is you get a process called galvanic corrosion, I'm not going to go into all the chemistry, but basically you'll get corrosion forming across these joints.
It's like a battery.
Yeah. And so they actually use a bead of glue, where they're joining a steel support structure for the suspension to the rest of the aluminum structure, so that you've got a really strong bond, but the steel and aluminum never actually touch because you have this adhesive in between them. And so you don't get that corrosion. So there's a lot of neat things that they can do with adhesives.
Yeah. So I don't want to belabor the point because we're almost at 2 hours, and maybe if we talk about glue too long, everybody's gonna start sniffing it. So I think we can leave it at that. But there are other technologies that go into the cars that I think are really fascinating, that are kind of given sort of short shrift,
like we did tonight.
Yeah, kind of. I think it's good. We touched on it.
I think it's a really interesting part, though, of the industry that we don't look at, and I think it's worth talking about some other time too. Because the other part that I think is fascinating is how we've moved from a few parts of like high strength steel to now so much of the vehicle is made up of different types of steel, different types of aluminum. It's just I think it's really fascinating when you look at the progression just really in the last few years.
Oh yeah, I agree. And like that is its own set of issues where, high strength steel is not exactly easy to join and to weld. And are you making custom blanks where it's, high strength, mild steel and, another flavor of high strength all together before you stamp it? And it's fascinating.
Well, and this is where the industry is often overlooked in terms of innovation and creativity and feats of engineering that it's really unrecognized in many ways. And I think needs some more attention put on it, because there are just some really, really fantastic creative innovations that have happened that really are overlooked.
Absolutely. And it's all new tech. It's not old stuff. It's new stuff in the last 20 years.
Right, exactly.
So that's the cool stuff.
Yes.
To me.
I agree.
Because I'm a geek. All right. Well, good. We have obliterated 2 hours of your day. So thank you for listening. In the meantime, if you want to head on over to Apple Podcasts, you can leave us a review. You can drop us some feedback in the review section of your podcatcher of choice, but don't use Luminary because they suck. If you want to get in touch with us, we're at wheelbearingscast@gmail.com. And you can, of course, comment on the posts at wheelbearings.media. And the Twitter handle is wheelbearingscast. Only vowel is the A in cast. And thanks for listening. And let's hope that something interesting happens before the next show.
We have
I'm sure
GM earnings coming up.
Oh, there we go. That's right. And they're only doing it quarterly now. So this is a big.
Well, they always do. They always did earnings quarterly.
I thought they were doing it monthly. Or
no, that was sales.
No, it was sales. Reports.
See, I don't know. I should just go back to paying attention to the creative. All right. We'll see everybody next time.
Bye.
Bye.